I've got to make sure everything's sweet on that. Right, let's go back onto that. Right, am I on the right channel? For some reason, it cut out. It swapped over again, and it shouldn't have done. So, for those, will this one refresh then? Hi, pal. Right, no. Good. Right, can you see everything? Are you seeing and hearing me? Give me a shout if you can see and hear me. And don't forget, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, especially on Rumble, because we've got to get this channel over 10,000 subscribers in the next few months. So I'm really relying on you to do that. And there's quite a bit going on in the background. I've been writing some other stuff, even and all, seeing you and hearing it. I can see you, Simon Lacey. Well done. Simon Lacey is on Locals. Well done, son. Luke 1956, otherwise known as Jim. How you doing, son? Jason, George, all these other people coming on. Right, so I'll wait for a little while to see if people settle back and come back. Some people won't, some people will. Hopefully people will come back to the live on YouTube, etc. And I will try and see if I don't really want to go on Facebook because it's bullshit. But just to emphasise, there was a few. So today, someone asked a question, two questions on Twitter. This one person, and it was basically, I could tell it was a troll, right? I can just see the way they pitch things, right? And one of the ways that they pitched it was if you're right, basically what they're saying is if you're right, everyone else is wrong. Then are they? Like basically, that's what this woman was saying. And she pitched it to say there's very capable people out there. Well, I ain't seen many of them. I've got to be honest with you. I'm asking this audience: have you seen many solicitors, barristers, or even judges that stand up for you as a subject to the realm? Because I've seen many, right? In fact, they're very few and far between. But if you've seen that, maybe I'm wrong. But my point. So getting back to what this is about tonight. In that exchange on Twitter, which I'm not interested in getting involved with trouble. They're a waste of my time. They're basically communist. I'm not interested in them at all. But what she said was, so with all these capable people, why has no one ever picked up on it and challenged it? Parliamentary sovereignty. And I simply went back to answer, right? Are you jabbed? Right. And she come back with, I'm so disgusted at you, why, you saying that to me, or you, blah, 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 blah. And then she proceeded, she basically showed that she was an extreme lefty, right? And then started saying, no, I'm not jabbed, and you're a moron, and started a diatribe of insults, right? So, and then someone else did, and just happened to be a Scottish account, right? So my point before I blocked it was I asked the question because it points to something called groupthink, right? Well, so groupthink is like mass hypnosis. You've all heard that saying, and like I said tonight's show is just a chill out thing, right? You've all heard, where in effect, mass hypnosis, or where people, someone tells a lie and it's such a big lie, and many people repeat it, that it for some reason becomes the truth, right? And then that was my point to her, was you've already seen it once, right? One person says there's a pandemic, My biggest belief with all of this, by far, that done the most damage, was the propagation that there was a pandemic when there wasn't, right? And the pandemic and the figures and hospitals, if you got run over by a bus, you died of COVID because done a swab and you had coronavirus in your system, right? So you've quite clearly been killed because a bus has just run over your head. But because you've tested positive for COVID, you died of COVID, right? That was a National Health Service participating, because they've been told to, in a propagation of a lie, of a fraud, right? It's no different what's gone on with parliamentary sovereignty, right? And except it's not with doctors propagating that lie, it's with lawyers and solicitors and barristers and people that you pay a lot of money to. Let me take £50,000 off you, right? And by the way, whilst this may be unconstitutional, we don't live in the United States of America. Where did the United States of America get the separation of powers from? Well, Sir Stephen Sedley explains in the book, right? Because there's people like David Starkey, who says we've never had parliamentary sovereignty. That is clearly, he says we've never had separation of powers in the same way as America has. That statement from David Starkey is clearly wrong, right? Because in the book Lions Under the Throne, Sir Stephen Sedley talks through the fact. Let me see if I can bring it up on the screen, because I just want to make sure you all understand what that book is. Right, I'll bring it up and see if I can find it. Hang on a minute. Let's see if I can find that book. There I am. Let's see if I can bring it up on the screen. I'll bring it up on the screen and I'll talk over it, because I think it's important. Right, so what I really want. Oh, it's not that one. What am I bringing this up on? My screens are going pear-shaped tonight, I've got to tell you something. There it is.
Grant, is it called the Mandela effect, when everyone believes something, like as a mass, they all believe something's happened that ain't? Is that called the Mandela effect?
Fuck if I know. So Janet has just asked, when someone believes something that it isn't true, but because someone says it, they believe it and they propagate it as true, is that called the Mandela effect? Anyone out there?
When everyone en masse believes it.
And everyone en masse believes it. So Janet's just said that.
I know it's got a name.
Huh?
It has got a name.
All right. Can everyone just hold on and wait in the chat, and the hundreds and thousands of people? Can you just hang on a minute while Janet interjects with the show? Right, carry on, babe. Let's have this private conversation, shall we? Why are you laughing and nearly falling off your chair? Why don't you tell everyone you're sitting there with your pajamas on talking to me?
I'm sitting here with my pajamas on, people.
I'm only playing with her, by the way. Like, there's not a set flow to this. So, Janet. So, Sue Ellen said yes, Janet.
Oh, okay.
Who else has said? Anyone else said anything? Yes, Middlesex man has said yeah. It's called the Mandelson effect. Let me have a. Leftists always miss the facts. Leftists always miss the facts. Yeah, no, that's what I mean. So, Jason, you're right. Janet is correct. Oh, blimey. Getting a lot of people saying Janet's correct. Oh, she's sitting there like, oh. Smiling. She does like a bit of interaction with this audience, right? So the direct answer, no, Mandela effect is something that has changed, like the Ferrara's mask had one snake on the headpiece. Now it's got a chicken head and a snake. That's the Mandela. I don't get that. The snore machine is correct. Never let a woman know she's right. It will never end. Chuck Mully, you are hilarious. You know that. You make me laugh. Right, so getting back to this book, right, because part of what we do, it ain't about me being an expert in anything. And by the way, so Stephen Sedley says in this that he spent his whole professional career as at King's Counsel and then as an appeal court judge at the highest level, right? And it was only in his retirement he started really deeply going into the history. And he said, even if I had a whole lifetime to do it, it wouldn't be enough time to talk about the English laws and constitution and the history of and the legal history, right? So you've got to have a number of different people come at it. But no one, he didn't say this is me saying, no one's ever written a book, which I am currently writing, to show the Constitution through the eyes of the subject of the realm or the citizen of the United States of America, where in that book I will be showing why it is that people like David Starkey was so wrong, right? And yet, with his voice, and that's what's frustrating, he's pushing this nonsense out there that we don't have a separation of powers when we clearly do, right? So that woman who spoke to me earlier on Twitter, if she hadn't have started calling me names, etc., and I thought, well, maybe she isn't a troll, right? I could tell by the way she'd written it, she was a troll, right? In other words, if it had been one of you and you wanted me to explain something, I would have then set out 3 different things, one after the other. One of them, quite clearly, and anyone can go and search this now, anyone, right? If you type the question in, Supreme Court UK, separation of powers, right? It will come up, and you ask the question, it will say on the about page of the Supreme Court, it tells you there is a separation of powers, right? So the Supreme Court, but then in the book, Lions Under the Throne, essays on the history of English public law. So what Sir Stephen is talking about in this book, that the judges are there to guard the Constitution, to guard the Crown, to guard Parliament, and to guard the subject. That's their role, right? And in this book, he talks about the Constitution. He tells you there is. He then goes into a number of details, which was fantastic, right? To listen to it. And he explains, I've watched the video of this, but what he did, I think there's something between 12 and 24 lectures that he did, because he's a law teacher at Oxford University, and he's done a number of lectures where he goes to different places and he gives a lecture on a certain subject to do with public law and the Constitution, right? And one of those was fantastic, but that lecture is contained within this book, right? But he's not. He's wrote the lecture as if he's writing the book, and he sort of helped me try and find a way of writing this book from the subject's point of view, right? because that's the difficult part of this, what I want to try and write and convey to you, and give you, like I did last night, show you an opening statement from the subject of the realm. This is why you should be doing this. So getting back to Sir Stephen Sedley, in that book, he talks about the interregnum, right, which is the interregal room. Was it room at the end? What was that bit at the end? I ain't got the word in front of me. Right, it's the interregnum, right? Interregnum. So that 12-year period of Cromwellian era, he explains it, and he explains that in history it is spoken about as if they was this terrible group of Protestant Puritan people, right? People have been taught that all over the world, and what he is saying is that was not true. It was a group of honest, God-fearing people that got completely fed up with corruption, right? And you did have some of them that were, like not extreme, but extreme, that basically said, we don't want anything to do with pagan Roman events, and that meant Christmas, Whitsun, Easter, right? Interregnum, right? Which means, so reg means Regina, num means between two. There was a period between was it Charles the First or James the First? I think it's Charles the First. Charles the First and Charles the Second, right? If I've got that right. Kings and queens I'm not good with, right? But basically that period, and then there was a period in between, which was Cromwell himself, and it was all these different groups of people, these disparate groups of people that were all fed up with the corruption, who then kicked in and said, we've had enough of this, right? And it stemmed from them turning around and saying, right, this is what we're going to do. And the people themselves made Easter isn't Christian. I thought it was the biggest event in Christianity. According to so I want everyone to understand this. According to Puritans, right? According to the Puritans, the Protestant religion, the Reformation, on heat, right? A lot of our calendar events in Christianity are actually paganism, and a lot of them are in effect associated because the Romans were in effect pagans, right? They weren't Christians originally, and I don't think they ever become. I think that was just a con to keep people out there. So when you read through what he was saying, what I'm trying to say to everyone watching this is a chill out. Don't forget, I'm not. Let me take that off the screen for a second. That is the book, right? People often say to me, "What book? You can go and buy this on Kindle. You can go and buy it for yourself. It is an interesting read. It's not an old book. It don't cost a fortune." And it's got all of his lectures on the law, but it's also got the links in it, and it explains what happened and how close things are currently to things going that we're in my opinion, a revolutionary period again, right? I don't think anyone's in any doubt. In any doubt whatsoever, that we're in an arena of complete and utter corruption from everywhere. The police are corrupt, the judiciary is corrupt, etc. Now, in this book, he says that he doesn't understand why the judiciary have his words, not mine, acquiesced to parliamentary sovereignty. He said because it's never existed in English history up until a certain point, right? And that's when they started. And then in 1948, they top and tailed. But you should be able to say it to any set of judges, and he helps you formulate. Although he's not actually doing that. In other words, you can formulate your case, constitutional case, by reading what he's saying, because he tells you about this case that the Supreme Court or the House of Lords intervened, and they struck down. They have actually struck down primary law, right? And it was and so remember what Sir John Law said, that he considered that the European Communities Act of 1972, coming into force 1975, I believe, right, or 1972, because of the referendum, was constitutional law, right? And this Act of Parliament that Parliament had made conflicted with a constitutional Act of Parliament, and the judiciary stepped in, just like Madison, right, and said that's unconstitutional. That law is unconstitutional, and they struck it down, right? If you want me to, do you want me to go and find this bit for you? Because I think it's quite important, and I don't want to really get it wrong or misrepresent what he said. But he went through a number of other things, right? And he also brought up, which I've brought up on a number of occasions, the Hunting Act. Right. Well, everyone says, including Lady Howe, that's the closest we've come to striking down a primary act of Parliament. Right. So the Supreme Court says on its own webpage, on its about page, that we're the third element of the separation of powers. You've got the Crown in Parliament. You've got the Commons, but there's two parts to Parliament itself. You've got the Commons and the Lords. Right. Well, in the old days, and he talks about this, it was everyone talks about is this bipolar thing, right? Between the Crown, it's between the Crown and Parliament, Crown and Parliament, Crown and Parliament, Crown and Parliament. Like it's a bipolar situation. He said it's not. It's a triangle, right? And he said then you've got the judiciary. You must remember that Parliament itself is only created by law. If it's only created by law, then it must be under the law. The same as the king, right? When you look at the king does not make of the law maketh the king. Parliament does not make of the law maketh Parliament. It's the same thing. And the only reason that we allow the free separation of powers, right, is because there's three separate powers that should be protecting us, right, as subjects to the realm. And if that goes pear-shaped in any way, if one of them is not working correctly, and currently, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, I fully 100% blame the judiciary for acquiescing, right? Acquiescing to this. And I believe that the United States of America, which is an extension of the English system, not the British system, the English system carried on the tradition. All it did was swapped out a crown, right? Went back to the Anglo-Saxon way, and so I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to elect our king, but they didn't call it a king. They called it they called him a president, right? And then they put part in with certain, because they create it, right? And it's about consent. None of this would exist unless the people consent to it, right? If we don't consent, they can't have any. And that's why they say, and it says it in that book, you cannot make repugnant law. If you make repugnant law and the people rebel, they do not consent. The law is null and void. Right? It says it in the book. Right? So I just want to make sure that everyone understands. So he brings this case. Let me see if I can bring this case up on the screen. It might be a bit difficult to find it. Let me see if I can go and find it. History and the law. Page 143 is what I want to go to. 143. That was the Dr. Bonham's case he's got in there. Parliamentary powers. So the sovereignty of Parliament and the abuse of power is chapter 7. That's where it is. Constitutionality. I think that is the one where I saw it. And then he talks about it. There's so much to this. If I could, I can't bring this, I don't think, up on the screen. I don't know why, but it won't accept it. Let's see if I can't dump it off that screen and dump it onto that screen. No, it won't have it. For some reason, it won't share this onto one. So I've got two screens either side and it won't share it on there. But let me go to this one. So parliamentary powers, constitutionality. And what I'll try and do is read this part out to you. This is in chapter 7. Constitution. So the first question is still whether, in spite of its ostensible omnipotence, Parliament is legally capable of abusing its constitutional power. The second is whether, even if it is, the courts can do anything about it. The answer to the first question has surely to be yes, because prolonging its own life indefinitely, and I want to get back to something in a couple of seconds, is a really important part of this, he says. Indefinitely would be one example. Authorising slavery or torture would be another, right? Well, they couldn't authorise torture because it's already been acknowledged, and they've acknowledged that the Bill of Rights forbids torture, right? And it was also abolished in 1641, right? Torture was abolished in 1641. They can't bring it back because it was forbidden by the English Bill of Rights, right? Which is a constitutional act forever. So that's something that you could really use to challenge them on, right? Would be another. The Dacian answer to the second question must be that the courts could do nothing about it. Well, Dicey changed his mind, right? Supremacy means what it says. Others may want to wait and see. Lord Stein, in the case of the Hunting Act, took the opportunity to ask whether Dicey's model of unquestioned parliamentary supremacy was out of place in modern United Kingdom, right? In fact, Dicey himself abandoned, and this is where he tells you, let's see if I abandoned supremacist position when Parliament began considering granting home rule to Ireland. He joined Carson and other unionists in contending that this was something Parliament lacked authority to do, right? So in his second book on the Union, he actually went against the Union because he said the Union has created a big problem because if it thinks Parliament is sovereign and then erases the constitutional positions and supremacy of the nations, that's a different, and that's when he started really going against everything, right? Parliament began to get lateral authority. When the Countryside Alliance challenged the validity of the Hunting Act, essentially on the ground that the Parliament Act 1949, which had been used to get legislation through, was itself invalid, right? This is such a beautiful book, right? The Attorney General did not argue that the submission was barred by Article 9 of the Bill of Rights, which forbids any questioning of the Courts of Parliament proceedings. His reticence may have been tactical, but it respected the logic that if the courts are to defer to an act of Parliament, they must be entitled first to decide whether the document before them is in truth, such an act. And so, do you remember what I said to you before? If any act of Parliament primary act of Parliament is being created through Parliament, it must go through a process, due process of law, to enact that law, and part of that is the assent or dissent of the monarch. And if it hasn't received that in the proper sense of the word, then it could still become law, but it would be secondary, and the courts could look at it. But now what they're saying is, no, we'll look at the whole thing. If you're doing something that bad, they must be entitled first to decide whether the document before them is in truth, such an act. And for that purpose, they may be required to consider what limits there are to Parliament's own powers. If that is right, it opens a door in the wall of parliamentary supremacy, which appeared to have been closed for good when in 1974 the House of Lords held that the courts had no jurisdiction to consider a claim that a private act of Parliament had been procured by fraud. Indeed, it was probable that the very fact that the law lords adjudicated on the validity of the Hunting Act establishes their jurisdiction to do so, right? Just the fact that they considered it, right, tells you that they can, right, shut down an act of Parliament. Since jurisdiction cannot be created either by silence or consent. So jurisdiction cannot be created either by silence or by consent, right? So these people who believe they're stepping out of jurisdiction by not voting, that in itself tells you that's not true. You can't do it by silence, you can't do it by abstention, and you can't do it by consent. Jurisdiction is there by force of law, right? So that again tells you that these people promoting don't vote because or don't register with a council and all that to vote, etc., are talking shit, right? Natural law. The levellers in the Civil War saw this. I'm not going to read much of this out, but I just want to get to the points that we're talking about. The levellers in the Civil War saw this issue coming in the first days of parliamentary supremacy, right? Parliament, they argued, was no more than the delegate of the people, and since natural law denied the people the power to tyrannise over others, Parliament was under the same constraint, right? And then this is the wording: we could not confer a power that was not in ourselves, right? So you can't confer as the people a power to Parliament to enslave someone, right? If that power, because it is forbidden by the Bible and by God, right? That power is not with us to do so, right? So therefore, if they're your representatives, you don't give them that power is not given to them, right? They can't create a law that goes against. If you couldn't do it as an individual, they can't do it as a collective. Do you understand what I'm trying to say to you? Right? That's what that said. If I sent that out now, I'm not sure if I can't bring that part up. We would not confer it. The Levellers' Agreement of the People, the first ever modern political programme in 1648, sought to lay down that no representative shall in any wise render up or give or take away any of the foundations of common right, liberty or safety. Right? Don't forget, this was the people rising up as part of this whole process of the Civil War. The silent step, which was accomplished in the Hunting Act case by simple reticence, may not be a recognition of such radical limitation on the legislative power, but it is not unrelated, at least in kind, to the larger stride taken by the US Supreme Court in Marbury versus Madison. when it established the reviewability of congressional legislation for unconstitutionality, the UK courts, in fact, did something analogous, albeit with parliamentary authority, when in 1991 they decided that part of Parliament's merchant shipping legislation was void for inconsistency with the European Communities Act of 1972. But the larger question is whether the rule of law makes the courts custodians of fundamental standards which they are required to uphold even if Parliament says otherwise. Lord Bingham was prepared to describe parliamentary supremacy and the rule of law as not entirely harmonious bedfellows. But he refused to go to the distance that other senior judges had gone in contemplating the possibility that the courts might refuse to recognise unconstitutional acts of Parliament. He limited himself to the hope that such a confrontation would never occur. Our courts, however, have been prepared to find that in other countries it has already happened. In 1976, Lord Simon of Glasgow, in a case in which the House of Lords had to deal with the consequences in this country of an anti-Semitic law adopted by Nazi Germany, said, "To my mind, a law of this sort constitutes so grave an infringement of human rights that the courts of this country ought to refuse to recognise it as law at all. Can we be completely confident that it could never happen here? Can Parliament break the law?" And it goes on, right? This is a fantastic book. I'm going to come off of this for a second because I think people should understand what I'm about to say, right? The key to this, and what I'm trying to tell you, we're normal people, right? Not just like me and you. This audience is fantastic, right? Normal people like me and you, normal people like me and Janet, well, not necessarily Janet, but right. I want everyone to understand this. If, as I just explained there, Parliament and the British system and the union system is allowing Sharia, which to all intents and purposes, especially as its apostasy laws are the death penalty, its honour killings of women, in some instances, although it's also almost always said that it's not part of Sharia, female genital mutilation, but they acquiesced and lowered the sentence for it from a life sentence, which was Offences Against the Persons Act 1861, Section 18, with intent, causing grievous bodily harm with intent. And then having aggravating factors, which is 1, it's a woman, 2, it's a young girl, 3, it's religiously motivated, 3, and it's and they're saying it's cultural, not Sharia, right? I don't care what it is, right? Under English law, it carried a life sentence, right? And then Parliament created a law that in effect reduced the sentence to 10 years maximum and created a separate offence to appease the people that were doing it, right? I think that should be massively challenged in the courts. I think Sharia should be massively challenged in the courts to say that what Sharia says and what these people are creating, and that the Bill of Rights states that you can't have these Sharia courts in England. The Bill of Rights tells you that because it forbids, the Bill of Rights forbids religious fanaticism, whether it is Roman Catholic, which was causing the problems for the Protestants, whether it is Protestant, Puritan, whether it is Judaism, because they've got their own set of laws, right? Or whether it is Islam. England was such a superb constitution and such a superb Bill of Rights that come from our ancestors, and they put it in place forever, giving us in the future a way of challenging it. And what did these corrupt officials do? They infiltrated the education system and they told a lie and propagated that lie, just as the Nazis did, just as the Soviets did, etc., about their own system, right? And they propagated the lie that Parliament was sovereign when it has never been sovereign in England. In fact, in that book, he tells that. Does everyone understand what I just said? Well, one of the things that come up today as well was to do with devolution and regionalisation, and what part of this means is. And by the way, in this book, it tells you one. You've got to like this. One of the things that Cromwell put in place permanently, right, as part of this new system, because it was being taken away from us, he was giving the power back to the people. And one of the things he put in place was that the constituencies and the candidates for Parliament must come from parishes. This is where parishes. This is where the whole system that we've got or had, and they're trying to demolish, come from, right? The parishes, the district, and the shire councils, and then the representatives come from that, right? It was Cromwell that put that in place constitutionally for England, right? So getting back to this thing, someone said, I can't remember if it's in the book or I read it today, something to do with the devolution. But what it said was that under devolution, there would be no centralisation, would no longer exist, and in effect, long term, there will be no British Parliament, right? So what would happen is Scotland, as a region, and it is a region, it has an assembly. It's a devolved element, right? It would have an assembly, and then the regions of England are not called the regions of England; they're called the regions of the UK, right? And it's called the nation. They say the nations and regions of the UK, right? And they refer to England as just a regionalised element. There is no England, right? So once they removed that, if you haven't got a British Parliament and you don't want that, you want an English Parliament. But if they then go to these different regions and devolve, there is no England. It's gone, right? There is no English Parliament. It's all gone, right? And that's what was being expressed. But in this, again, I'm getting back to this book. What I'm doing is highly recommending that people read it because, and I'm not suggesting everything in the book is right? I am not suggesting that you could put word for word what he said, etc., straight into a book, but it helps you formulate your mind to what the challenges are. And this book is literally about, it says essays on the history of English public law and the Constitution. So he makes reference to two elements: administrative law and constitutional law, right? Any questions? Don't forget, we're supposed to be having a chill out tonight. I'm not really doing a thing. I just think. So again, I just want to emphasise to people. So Stephen Sedley's Jewish, right? I haven't personally got a problem with Jews as such, right? I've got a problem with the Jewish mafia, I've got a problem with the American mafia. I've got a problem with the Russian mafia, with every form of mafia. I've got an issue with organised crime and organised political crime, right? Which is what we're currently dealing with in this country. By the way, he actually talks about in the book, it's not actually parliamentary sovereignty, it's party sovereignty, right? Because that's what they've designed into this. These politicians have designed that into it. Can we just set up our own parliament? No, is the answer. That's our parliament, just take it back. But the people need to rise up. What you do need to do is get rid of the Acts of Union because it brought in Roman law jurisdiction. By the way, he brings up in the book the Union of the Crowns in 1603 and the political union of 1706, 1707. And then he talks about the period in between. Organised crime, otherwise known as the elites, could be. I won't call them elites, I'd call them a criminal oligarch that seeks to enslave everyone. Is the devolution agenda a good thing? No. Devolution is regionalisation. It's an absolute destruction of England. That was always the intention. The Fabian seat devolution is all British law defunct if the kingdom is dismantled. What are the biggest threats from globalists? Destroying England. So what the globalists always wanted. So I want everyone to understand that the key point here, and there is a key point, globalism, unionism is a stepping stone to globalism. Globalism is one world order, right? The antithesis is it?
Antithesis.
Eh?
Antithesis.
The antithesis. The antithesis. Right? Listen, I got that teeth, right? The antithesis, right? The antithesis of globalization is nationalism, right? But I don't like referring it to I don't like referring to it as nationalism. I prefer it when people talk about it properly as nationism, where we have our own set of laws, our own governance system, a separation of powers, and a common law jurisdiction, nothing to do with Roman law. That's what we've always pushed back on. And that's what we'd be doing. I can't remember getting my pay packet in cash and always had to sign for it on a Friday payday. You sound Spanish. I think Spanish have got a problem. I could play that. Did you ever see that? That was quite funny. Thank you, Trey. I must have missed it. Let's have a look. Where's that say there? Neil, book Graham showed was lying under the throne by Stephen Sedley. There may be a PDF of it. If you put a PDF out there, I mean, you can get it. You can get it on Kindle. You can go and buy a copy of it. But it's not. Just to make sure, it is about the law, but it's directly focused on constitution and administrative law, and he's basically explaining there have been legal challenges, but he's not the only person to do it. Like I said to you, if you go and read through this book, right, which is a tiny little book, he actually, let me see if I can put this out to you. Not sure. Lord Denning, reasons for opposing the enactment of the European Convention in the form of a British Bill of Rights is later debate on the same subject, same anxiety by Lord Diplock and Lord Morris. Well, let me say, so he's got the Bill of Rights here in this book, so that's that one, right? Just to make sure you've got it, right? And the Hamlin Lectures, Constitutional Fundamentals, Sir William Wade, right? And there's another one there, which I'm sure my beautiful assistant will pick up in a second, which is Sir John Law's. But the one I wanted to show you was
There you go.
Parliamentary sovereignty. Thanks. Parliamentary sovereignty. Parliamentary legislation amending House Inner Courts. Parliamentary scrutiny. Political reversal of legislation. Procedural maladministration. Let's have a look and see. Parliamentary Commission for Parliamentary Represent. Parliamentary sovereignty. There it is. Now, I wonder where it says that one. So 3538. 3530. I'm sure it was later on. 82 and 98. 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 Let's just see if I can bring this. 82 and 98. Because he actually talks about something else. Oh, there it is. There's that, what I spoke about before. The County Court Act 1959 provided also the county judges immune from judicial control except by way of appeal. So the Parliament took away the right of appeal to the Leasehold Reform Act. All roads to the court were barred. This was presumably intended to make things easier for tenants when describe the abuse of power of Parliament. Speaking constitutionally, this is the justification I see it for the strong. It might even be the rebellious. It's create pockets of uncontrollable power in violation of the rule of law. The law delay on certainly expense 10. The Minister of Commons accused the High Court of being trigger happy. Yeah. So I'll just give you an example. What he says is, like, Parliament could not create such a law that would give you no access to refuse all your access to appeal, right? It would be creating a dictatorship, and it's not allowed to do that. And the law lords would step in and say that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. There's a particular, I think it was this one. The directed jurisdiction of the Court's Original Foreign Compensation Act or relative a commoner phenomenon in indirect attack granting power such as Minister of Opinion. Favourable formula draftsman in the unwarranted attempt to create David existed justify exercise power. For over 40 years, the judges have been showing signs of resistance to these insidious provisions, and now in the Thameside case, the House of Lords has confirmed that they are not to be disarmed so easily. The Education Act allowed for the Secretary of State to dictate policy to the local education authority. If the Secretary of State is satisfied that they are acting or proposing to act unreasonably, Mr. Molly was entirely unsatisfied in his own mind that the grammar schools should be replaced by comprehensives, so he proceeded to intervene. Both the Court of Appeal and the House of Lords explained to him that he had misunderstood the Act if he was required to be satisfied that the certain facts existed. Antagonism, there's a whole thing. I'll need to go back and read through that, but there was a case in here again where it showed you will not go against the rights of the people, right? But picking up on these cases, this is one of the things that's quite worrying about AI. Without your direct access to these and reading it yourself, does everyone understand what I mean by when I say it's a bit like if you have someone standing up in a pulpit in a church telling you what the Bible says and telling you what Jesus said and telling you what God's intentions are on what was happening, and you're all sitting there going, right, nodding away like dogs, right? And then all of a sudden, they print out the Bible I'm looking for my Bible. It's in my bag, right? They print out. Don't worry about it. Oh, and all of a sudden they give it to the congregation. Everyone in the congregation's got their own copy of the Bible, right? So you come back in a month's time. You've read the Bible inside out. Some of you are better at retention than others, right? That's just a fact of life. Next thing you know, the geezer gets in the pulpit and he says, Jesus said this and this is the interpretation, blah, 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 blah. And it turns out it's his interpretation. And all of a sudden there's 50 people in the congregation went, that's not what he meant. I've read it. That's not what it said. So what they're doing with AI now is they're taking all these books, they're cutting the backs off, right? They're scanning the books and putting in there, but there'll be bits missing. But then people go along, rather than read the book themselves, they ask AI a question. Did this happen? AI comes back with an answer. Currently is coming back with an answer. Janet has seen this a number of times with Grok, right? I do not take anything that Grok says as fact, right? I just want to make sure this audience, I may look at things, right? I may ask it questions. I may ask what a particular law was and what year, and it'll come back and it's just an aid to my memory. It's not something I rely on. But I've sat there and gone, I've asked it a question and it's come back with the completely wrong answer and gives me this story. And I think, that's complete and utter bollocks, right? And then I've looked at Janet and said, that's wrong. And then I've put in there, what about this? And it comes back, and then all of a sudden it'll apologize. Oh, yeah, I've got that bit wrong. This is blah, 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 this case, right? This is what they said. It's been programmed and has algorithms to guide you in a certain direction. Well, that's the same as the people in the pulpit, right? Again, I don't want to be too cocky with this, but if Judaism was compatible with Christianity, why did they have to change our constitution and our oath system to allow Jews to take a different oath to Christians? Why couldn't a Jew take a Christian oath if they're compatible? Well, the answer is they're not compatible, and the Jews completely, flatly refused to take a Christian oath. That tells me there is no Judeo-Christian. That's a nonsense, right? Because that's what happened. That's what the Jews Relief Act was. That's what the Oath Act was in the 1800s. That's when it started seriously accelerating. And because of that, you then end up with Jewish people as judges, right? Right, don't forget to hit the like button. Never ask a question that you don't know the answer to. Is what barristers do. That is absolutely right. So Steve Lomas, that's exactly right. Never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Graham, did you get a chance to see my email on the Federalist, anti-Federalist papers? I've read through them before, but I don't know what if you sent it to me recently. Probably not. Never ask a question. J Tops Phoenix. Look up Gog Magog, a celebration London. What do you say? The Nazis burned the books they hate us to have our own minds. Yeah, and there is an argument that the books that they burnt were a lot of them books that they was burning were communist books and were I don't know what the word is. They were very corrupting of your mind. Whether they were pornographic stories, where there was some people telling kids that they could be, a little boy could be a little girl and all that. That I don't know what all of the books were that they read, But to be fair, if you think about, and I'm trying to think of his name, there was a French king, I think it was Louis the Ninth, or whatever it was, or Louis the 15th, or whoever it was. The Talmud was read to him by a Jewish convert, right? And that king said, I want every one of them books. And it was 10,000 books. This is going back hundreds of years ago. 10,000 handwritten books in Hebrew, right? Or even Yiddish, right? And 10,000 books was brought in, and 10,000 books were burnt as heresy, right? So throughout history, what you're seeing with AI is exceptionally dangerous, in my opinion. Does Guinness now do Guinness in a cola can? Yeah. I've stopped drinking Guinness because it makes all my fingers go funny. Them fingers are still a bit funny. And then Janet made me drink Coca-Cola. Thank you, darling. Loving in pajamas, by the way. Paul Rumble, laugh out loud. Host judge. Gemini always says British Constitution is persistent. It eventually surrendered to, say, the English Constitution. Yeah, again, got to be very careful, because if the people programming it have been told to lie, it's a bit like people who say that the Acts of Union is in some way a constitution. It isn't. It is a constitutional, and it's referenced as a constitutional pair of acts. But Scotland, for example, or England, but we've got no English parliamentarians. They're all British. But Scottish parliamentarians existed. If they went back and opened up their own parliament as a sovereign parliament, they could kill the Acts of Parliament and the Union straight away. They don't need a referendum for permission, or the Supreme Court's permission, or anyone else's permission. They can just do it. They're a nation in their own right. Currently, they're not, because they are a region of the European Union, which is what they want to be. So I think all of this is a play in the background, right? It's just you're just watching a movie. These actors are pretending that they want independence in Scotland. They don't, because they want, what they're actually saying is, we want to be part of the Roman Empire. And what we're saying is, we don't want to be part. And but the other group of people saying they don't want any part of it, the United States of America, right, and Russia. Canadians' control of the West Libraries. Garbage in, garbage out. Yep, Steve Lomas, absolutely right. Daddy Dragon's full English show website. Don't forget, I'm out there, right? I'll never use the IR chat. Total rubbish. No, again, there's the only time I've ever, and again, so when I write skeleton arguments, they're my skeleton arguments, right? I write and look up the law and bring it all up there, right? And then we've got a person in Norfolk who's got a company, and they set out a skeleton argument exactly as the judges want to see it, right? So it looks professional. That costs about £100 to get some formatting in a way, and then they proofread it and check it. They don't give you any opinion on it. They just check it all out and put it in place. And that person said to me that what you provide us with is better than what most of these solicitors and barristers provide us with. But they almost think that, that's what you want to put in, just get on with it. And we're thinking, what's this? Whereas you set out a logical part of it, whereas we don't get that from these people. So just to make sure that's out there, just do it, Scotland. Yeah, but Scotland won't. Scotland won't. It's my personal opinion. Scotland won't do it. All right. And don't forget the other book is that one. There's a number of these books, by the way. The Common Law Constitution, John Laws, and in this he actually speaks with reference to a number of different things. But we do need to challenge this. A constitutional balance. This meeting of Parliament and judges is the constitutional balance. It is the core of my thesis in this lecture. By force of the common law, efficacy is allowed, but oppression is forbidden to the power of the state, and this is achieved by not benign continuum of developing law. Right? See that bit in there? There's a few absolute star parts in there that once you read through it all, and that's about constitutional balance. In other jurisdiction, authority interprets statute in common law. It's fourfold method. Right? Sir Edward Coke. There's so much stuff in here. And natural law is key. But like I say, if anyone, I do want to go through this, and I've got to go and have another little read of that. Right, is everyone fed up enough? That I thought I'd tune in tonight and just have a chill out, not go through anything too. But we are going to be accelerating with some of our learning, and then hopefully put them together as some more learning. East End earlier, the pie and mash shops, pearly kings and queens, dockers, market traders, think it was the 50s. Thought of you and that video you did a while back. Yeah. The indigenous Scottish people doesn't want their country handed over to the EU mafia swamp. That is why they want to stay in the union. Well, the union is part of that. Reason, fairness, and presumption of liberty. Right, anyway, that's it. I'm going to say good night. God bless. Don't forget to hit the like button. I'll see you all Monday night, and it will be with Dr. Glidden. Great show. Thank you for the interactive, clear information. Much appreciated. No problem. Thank you. Good night. God bless. Don't forget what I believe in. The Constitution is the solution. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, and you want to have a quick look at this, that's the book that I've been talking about tonight. So Stephen Sedley was an appeal court judge, I think, for 24 years. He's not a mug. I've actually met him in person at a Selden Society event, where he come in disguise with a flat cap on. I said, you can't get round us like that. But there you go. That's it. Good night and God bless.